So I would like you to do your best job reactifying the thing I just put in chat. 6 minutes,
Like,
go.
do you just want us to create React app, or do you want us to just?
Please use Create React App.
So I'll be back in 20 minutes then.
So there's more that we can do. So if you're like pretty solid on this, prove it to me.
Is this being recorded?
Sure is.
Cool.
Another minute. All right, pencils down. Please Slack me your app.js file. Let's see how we did this morning. Welcome, Indiana.
Thank you.
Slack me with your best code. Why don't you slack me with your best code? Slack me with your best code. Slacking away. Not bad, Bryce. Still need Mr. Holly. Thank you, sir. All right, cool. Getting somewhere. So much better than this morning. Good job, everybody. Let's take a look at it. All right, so I'm gonna, let's see. Nope, yep. There we go. All right, give me a different noun. Another animal, why not?
Chinchillas.
Chinchilla, love it. All right, so I CRA up some chinchillas, some chinches.
Should we be following along or just watch?
Just watch.
Mine took about 5 minutes and 30 seconds of the 6 minutes. Not even kidding.
What was that?
My CRA took about 5 minutes and 30 seconds of the 6 minutes. Not even kidding.
That doesn't surprise me.
That's why you got to get fast at typing, Andrew.
Yeah, I knew that. So Speed up, baby. It's been taking a little bit longer today than it normally does. Not exceptionally longer, but it does feel significantly longer than it usually does. All right, let's hop into the Chinchillas app. We go into the app.js, get rid of the logo, get rid of the rest of this. All right, now here's the first thing I noticed. There were some people who took out this outer element. Don't do that. Keep this one in here. It's handy to have something at the top level of like just about all your components that you can use to target with CSS. And also, you have to have a single top level element, always, always. So, if let's see. Put this in here. All right, cool. So this gives us a starting place. If I, for whatever reason, didn't want to have this outer div, I still have to have something. Because if I do this, you can see I'm even getting a parsing error on it. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an element. So you can use a fragment if you want to, which looks like this. I would just keep that outer wrapping div. Not for every component, but definitely for this one. Like that. Cool. Questions about any of this so far? All right, your next challenge is to turn these chinchillas, turn each of these into components. So think about that. What are we going to have to do? Talk me through componentizing those.
So we have to make a separate file and probably a components folder.
Separate file.
And then we have to make a React function that we can pass in props to.
Yep.
And then have that put out, return the LI with whatever the props are.
You're beautiful. That's exactly what we have to do. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. See if you can pull that off in 2 minutes. Go. Cool. Slack me what you got. Let's take a look.
Is this switch up here somewhere? I think so.
My dog is trying to kill either herself or me by sitting directly behind me on the floor.
Cool. So just about everybody was in the ballpark, but there's one major distinction that I'm seeing here that we should get clear on. What on earth do you name this component? So here's a good way to figure this out. Let's say, before I've even built it, what do I want the interface for this to look like? What should it look like when I'm done? This is a critical programming skill that separates the pros from the joes. What should the end result look like? If this component was already built out, how would I use it? So I could do something like that. I could do something like that. One of you had that, which is kind of interesting. What do we think about these?
I think cat's the most accurate, like the singular,
Singular? Why?
because you're only identifying one.
Yep, only one cat. So cats, plural, is probably out. Now this list item one, this is kind of interesting. What about that?
That seems like it's almost a better idea because then it's reusable more frequently.
So that's a very strong argument in favor of that. Because really, the ultimate thing that I'm going to build just takes in some string and puts it in an LI. I have all kinds of different ways I want to do that. So I do get more reusable that way. This is going to sound bonkers, but I don't think this is that wacky a pattern. So let's say I build out this list item component. Takes in props, it returns this template that has a list item. Oh, no, this is interesting. Oh, no, that's good. We do props.name. Okay. Now, this actually changes some things, though. Because if I say name, that's sort of like coupled to my like cat or my chinchilla domain, right? Doesn't have to be. But then that should be something more like props.content. And that should be something kind of like that, right? That's another thing. As a programmer, always keep an eye out for things like that. Because this will happen all the time. You have some specific domain, you rework it, you rework it, you rework it, and all of a sudden you find some abstract version of the problem. And you go, oh shit, I'll just make the abstract one. When you hit that point, you need to come up with the abstract terms for each of the things. Because it's not a name. That's just what it was when it was a chinchilla or a cat. If it's a generic list item, then I'm probably talking about the content of that list item. All right, so I said I was going to do something kind of wacky. This is the kind of wacky thing. I don't think it's absurd to do something like this. That totally works for me. Can anybody think of why I don't think that's such a bad idea?
Because in our app, we're still being really specific about like what the thing is that we're putting there.
Yeah. Because this looks a hell of a lot better than that with a fucking comment or something like, okay, well then just call it a cat. So this is really wrapping a generic thing as a specific thing. I'm sure there's somebody who'd fight me on a code review on that, but I think that the extra clarity on that is worth the fact that you're essentially just doing the exact same thing twice. Your code should document itself. That's an example of that.
Would you separate those into two separate components then? And
They are two separate components.
so,
They're in one
like,
file right now, but they are two different components. In practice, yeah, I'd put them in different files. Oh, so the other part of this. So I'm going to roll with just cat for now. But I don't really have any gripes with that other approach. Or, oh, sorry, we're doing chinchillas now. This is a chinchilla. So if I want to put this in a different file, what do I do?
We need a components folder.
Do we?
Well, you don't have to have one, but
That'd be nice.
but you would just make a chinchilla.js.
Sure. All right, so that file exists. I can put this guy in here. I can export default it. And then always, 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 even though we're not like using it anywhere in the file, if it doesn't have React up at the top, it's going to get real mad at us.
Does it have to have React for the return to work correctly? Or does it not matter for that?
It has to have React in there for the JSX to work. If it's just some function, who cares? But Good luck trying to write a return value like this without JSX. It's going to go, what's that crazy ass angle bracket? The React, importing React is what makes that work. And then over here, import chinchilla from, if like Bryce was saying you want to throw that in a folder, no problem. It would be kind of like that. All right, so I can replace these list items now. All right. We had one step closer to like some sanity in this app. Next thing, I don't want to hard code each of these names. I have an array of chinchillas. So I want to put these in state. So I'm putting those in state. What do I have to do? Big picture.
Change the function app to a class.
Why?
Because functions don't have state.
Because functions don't have state. Only class components have state. So if I need state, it's got to be a class component. So if I'm changing it from a function component to a class component, I got to change the word function to class. I got to extend React component. One other thing that I have to do, real easy to forget.
Instead of return, it has to be render.
Yeah, it needs to be, it's the return value of a render method. And then I got to keep track of some chinchillas in state. So that's what I'd like you to do right now. If you were like dealing with a door guy or something like that, I'll put this code in chat.
Thank you.
All right, so app.js should look like that. And chinchilla.js should look like that. Oop, nope, no, it shouldn't. No, it shouldn't. Fuck, and I don't think I can delete comments in this. Chinchilla.js should look like, no, fuck, did I do it again? God, come on, man. There. Fuck. In that. Oh God, why, now that it's one of those things like, I don't know where your name, what's the term for it? Your name stops meaning anything, or like words lose their meaning.
It's something saturation.
Semantic saturation or something like that. I'm getting that with like my Vim commands. I don't know them, like my fingers know them. How do I copy something to the clipboard? It's, God, it's not control that. Oh my God, why am I losing my mind on this? I want to go this register yank. No. This register yank. There it is. Good God. All right, that's what your chinchilla one should look like. Satiation, semantic satiation. That's what it is. All right, remember my Vim command, remembered my Jeopardy word. Cool, 2 minutes. I want you to get these chinchilla names in state. I felt like I was saying that like the governor or something like that. All right, 2 minutes, go. put these chinchilla names in state. All right, slack me what you got. Did those chinchilla names make it to state? Outstanding, Adrian. There.
Almost. Didn't quite work.
Oop, almost, Mr. Hawley. Remember that state's an object. All the things that we have to do with objects still apply. Any others coming in? I can't help if I don't know. Send me what you got. All right, let's take a look at how we would statify this. Function becomes class. Come on, man. Function becomes class. Parentheses go away. We extend React.component. You can also do component as a named import up top. Either way, doesn't matter. Then this gets wrapped in a render method. Cool. So this up here, remember, the body of a class is not the body of a function. We can't just write random statements in it. It's a different syntax. So this isn't const state equals. It's just state equals. It's like an instance variable, like the single at in Ruby. Now, I think I saw a bunch of you miss on this is that if I'm keeping those chinchilla names in here, I can't just do something like that. Need to give it a key. Chinchillas, like that. So if it's an array of objects, they'll all have names. Cool. All right, so those chinchilla names are in state now. Now, how do we use these? How do we actually use them? So, anytime we're trying to do any kind of JavaScripty thing inside of a JSX template, needs to be wrapped in those. That's rule number one. Any JavaScript that goes in your JSX, got to wrap it in curlies. And then the thing that we want out of this dot state dot chinchillas, it's an array. And so we need to say which item in the array that we want. So that gives us back the object, and we want its name. Like that. Ask me some questions.
So whenever you're doing like a class components, whatever is manipulated, like I guess the state will always be contained inside that class.
Yes. If I want some other component to have it, two rules. First, it needs to be below me. I can't pass state up. That's not a thing. So it needs to be below me, and I need to pass it down as props. 8 times out of 10, your state is someone else's props. Your props were somebody else's state. Not always. Like when we hard code some name in here, that's a chinchilla's props. It's not going to be anybody's state. I just hard coded it. Most of the time, though, it was probably somebody else's state. More questions about this?
Does state have to be an object, or could you just get rid of the key and have it be an array?
Has to be an object. Has to. Yeah, if you did something like that, no bueno. I mean, it actually might technically work because arrays are objects. And if you hadn't put this together, check this. I'm about to blow your mind. That's essentially what an array is. It comes with some other goodies too. It uses something called the prototype system, which we're old enough to learn about, but not right now. But yeah, if you do that in the production React app, somebody's going to assume that you don't know what you're doing. Other questions so far? Cool. Next step. We don't want to have to like write this all out by hand every time. So I want you to iterate through those chinchillas in state. And how are we going to transform an array of chinchillas into an array of JSX elements?
Map.
Map. Cool. So I want you to map through those chinchillas. And you should end up returning a bunch of chinchilla components and then put it in the template. Now, one gotcha on this. Actually, I want to see what you come up with. So I'm going to put 2.5 minutes on the clock. Your best shot. See if you can iterate through this and map those. Go. All right, slack me what you got. Bob, you got one?
Yeah, I didn't send it. Here, let me try again.
You're beautiful. Cool. So let's take a look at some ways we could do this. I'd probably recommend doing this inside of the render. It's not the only place you could do it. It's probably where I would do it though. So we could have something like const chinchillas is this dot state dot chinchillas dot map, and for each chinchilla we want to transform them into a new chinchilla component with name is chinchilla.name, like that. And then this becomes chinchillas. There we go. I would probably do something like this. What you can't do, saw this one a couple times. I can't do that. Why?
Well, you can't have a const outside of the render.
Correct. A class body is not a function body. I can't just put whatever statements I want to put in there. Has to be class syntax, which is counterintuitive, to be kind about it. Now, I could do that. That sort of works. Now, this one's mad at me. It says chinchillas is not defined. So what does that have to actually be?
This dot chinchillas.
This dot chinchillas, like that. That works. I'm saying that this is a property. Now, here's what I don't like about this. This works. You'll see people do this. The reason this kind of starts making me anxious is that the problem, this is like problem number one with classes in JavaScript, is this. Soon as you start doing that, I get real anxious about losing my this context. So you can, and also this doesn't respond to state changes particularly well. This will work really well one time, and then when the state changes, it has a hard time keeping up with it. So what you do instead is you wrap it in a function. You say, cool, well, chinchillas is that. And now, if I invoke it, that works. That works reliably well. Starts reading kind of funny, though. So my preference for you would be to do something like that. What I would not do, and I saw this as well, this technically works, is if you do something like that. Okay. And then I take this thing and just pop it in here. Totally works. And you will see this in React apps all the time. Can you tell why I don't like it?
Super fucking unclear.
Super fucking unclear. It's just hard to read. So you are allowed to do logic inside of JSX templates. I would stay away from it. Sometimes we can't avoid it, like ternaries, for example. Yeah, kind of hard to keep ternaries out. It's the only way we can do conditionals in JSX. So like, yeah, okay, I kind of get that. But if I can replace this with this, I always will. Cool. Your first goal as a React developer is like basically to be able to do all this kind of stuff. If we can switch between functional and class components, if we can put things in state, if we can iterate through things in state and make those show up in templates, if we can import components, if we can export components, I would say you're probably as good as most React developers out there. Again, we're still missing forms and we're missing events. But you got all the rest of that down? That's pretty little stuff. Questions?
Quick question on your map. You mentioned earlier how it needs an ID or React gets pissed off.
Oh, yeah. React will get real mad at me if I don't do this.
Or a key. Yeah, key.
Key. So it is, if you have an ID, you should use that. But really the only real constraint is that it's unique. So if your names are unique, you could use those.
And it doesn't have to be identified as key, because I did ID as opposed to key and it totally rendered.
Like, you didn't like that?
Exactly.
It'll render. Check your console.
Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't like it.
Doesn't like it. That doesn't mean it won't do it. But it'll get mad at you, and it should. It's going, how am I supposed to do my job when you're not giving me a key? So hang on then. What did we do then? It still did it. What happened to that ID?
Did it become another prop?
Became another prop. So over in this, I also have a props.id. Key is magical. Key might not even show up in props. Maybe it does, but I kind of doubt it.
It doesn't. I just checked.
Nice. One more trick I'll show you. If we're passing in more than one prop, you can imagine this gets kind of messy. Behold. That's how you keep your components from like being 5,000 columns long.
It does show you the key if if you're in the React inspector, component inspector, it shows the key like on the actual element,
Excellent.
not in the props.
Very cool. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Other questions about anything we've done?
Does state act like exactly like an object? Like, can you do function calls within state?
Oh, that's a good call. I did like some behavior is some function like that. Shit, I don't know. I wouldn't. That's a very bad idea, but it's probably literally possible. That's a good one. I never thought about that before. What else?
So since state can be, I don't know, since it's an object, what if we're pulling that from like an outside source? Like, is that a thing like fetching and then you receive a lot of data back? And then, I mean,
Okay, here's how you do that. We're not replacing state with whatever we get back. We're setting state. So this is like looking forward a little bit. There's such a thing as a lifecycle method. Render is actually one of them. The only other one that like you need to know in this program is component did mount. So this means that this JSX like rendered.
So it's
After
kind of
that
like
rendered-
DOM content loaded, sort of like on DOM
Exactly.
content.
Exactly like that. So component did mount. This is where things like fetches would go. So I fetch some URL. Oops. And then I parse it. And then I take my response. And then I'm going to do something like this dot set state chinchillas response dot chinchillas. Never, ever, ever do something like this. That's against the rules.
Is that
See?
because the state is asynchronous? Is that why it's against the rules?
It's more complicated than asynchronous, but yes, that's why. The reason is that when state does and doesn't get updated is something that React controls, not us. So by doing this, we're saying, hey, React, I don't know when you want to take care of this, but like this state change needs to happen. And so it might do that immediately. It might bundle it with a whole bunch of other state changes. It might, who fucking knows? That's React's business. The deal that we make with React is that anytime we want to change the state, we have to do this .set state. So this is Drake no. That's Drake yes. See, I'm a teacher who talks to the kids. Shakespeare is actually my favorite rapper.
so if we had that component did mount, we wouldn't need to set our own state up there, correct?
No, you still do. It always needs an initial state.
What if it's an empty object? Does that
Exactly.
that still counts? Okay.
Yep. And here's why. This is the last thing we'll do. So I need to do this. Well, can anybody figure it out? What happens if I don't have this? If I just comment this out This is going to explode the first time I try to run it. Why?
It's going to say there's no chinchilla's key in the state object. Like when you're calling this.state.
That's the problem, but that's not the specific error I'm going to get. You should know the error because you're going to see it, I promise you.
Is it that just state doesn't exist?
Nope. State always exists. Whether or not you declare it, it's there. What is the specific error you're going to get?
Well, I just commented it out, and it's a type error. I cannot read property of null.
Because of that. Probably going to be something like undefined method map on undefined. Because this.state.chinchillas is undefined. Undefined doesn't have a map. An empty object does. That's not a problem. It's just not going to run. That's totally fine. What we want to have happen is we want this list to start empty, and then whenever the fetch finishes, the state change happens and it re-renders. It reacts to the state change. It's almost like that's where the name comes from.
So will it render the stuff before the component did mount runs? It'll render everything you had in the render method?
Yes. Including that
Like
empty
optimistic
object.
rendering, and then the fetch puts in everything after.
Correct. And then it renders a second time. So if I put something like this in there, that's going to render twice. Once on the initial render with the empty array, and then again after the fetch comes back, sets the state, and it re-renders the component because of the state change. Since I'm using this.state, it goes, cool, well, anytime state changes, I probably need to re-render. That's what React is doing under the hood. Anything else? All right, between now and stand down, just fuck around with this. Try to make a React app. Can you do this can you make up your own little problem? Little 2-component jobby. See if you can get some stuff to work. See if you can break some stuff. See what happens if you leave this out. See what happens if you try fetching something and doing a set state. Just play around a little bit. Think of it like courage time. See you guys at stand down.
Thanks. See you.